Welcome to Athletic Ambitions with me, Fiona Carter.
And me, Tom Barlow.
We are here to share the stories of our Cass and Friends athletes, aspiring Olympians and world champions. We will also interview elite athletes and professionals. They will be sharing their stories, the ups and downs and bumpy ride that their journey may have. We will learn how they persevere and deal with setbacks, train and compete at the highest level, and how their mindset helps with every step of the way. So if you want to hear about our upcoming athletes and learn from the best, this podcast is for you.
This is Athletic Ambitions, where every journey begins with a single step.
Well, thank you, Dan, so much for coming on to our podcast. It's going to be so lovely hearing your side of your story because you were Olympic trialist, weren't you, for 2 years? The year I started university and the year I finished university, I think. So that's kind of fun.
A long time. I don't want to embarrass you, but yeah, it feels like a long time ago now.
It is a long time ago. So we've got a person here on the podcast who's trained as you do, our young athletes. So I guess between the age of 12 and 18, you were training really hard. And then Dan also went off to America to do his university. So much to chat about in this interview today. So thank you very much for coming on. Brilliant. So Dan, tell us about your training then as a youngster. You know, our athletes, we take them on between the age of 12 and 18. How did you train as a youngster through school and balance it with friends, family, education?
I was fortunate that my dad was quite a keen swimmer, and my mum was not a strong swimmer. So from a very young age, my sister and we were taken swimming religiously, weekly, and I think we were about 4 or 5, and a lifeguard sort of noticed we had a little bit of a flair for it, and he recommended we joined the swimming club at a very young age, and it just developed from there really, and before I knew it, swam at a club level, which then became a county level. And doing more training, juggling it around school. As you know, swimming is a tricky one because pool time is early and late when other people don't use. I mean, it is changing now, and you know, schools have different options, and universities certainly it's very different. But no, I mean, I loved it back then. I mean, there were mornings. I think I was 11 when I started early morning swimming, which was but my dad had a very early work shift, so we would get up, he would drop me at the pool, a little bit later my sister joined me, we were both going on a regular basis, and before I knew it, I think I was about 13, went off to nationals as the progress kept going and putting more time into the training, juggling it around school, and it grew from there really, and it became a social thing. Saturday night Speedo League galas, the parents would sit in the swimming stands having a chat while we raced. Then it was sort of Southern Counties at Crystal Palace, which was a massive deal on the bank holiday weekends. And then, you know, if times were good, you'd go off to national championships, and it just kept going really. I mean, I in the back of my mind, I was fortunate that I had a family friend who was doing really, really well and was a few years older from our local swimming club. So I had this sort of aspirational thing to follow Neil's footsteps, Neil Harper, and he'd got a scholarship to Millfield, the private school in Somerset, had a fantastic swim setup. He then went to Louisiana State. So, you know, he was just a few years ahead of me, and I could see this path unfolding, and it was what I wanted to try and do really, I just sort of kept following in his footsteps. He did go to the LA Games in '84. He did go to Seoul in '88. I didn't, and sadly, I would have loved to, but you know, it's only a small people in the world of swimming that qualify for those individual events.
Yes, and those, you know, the times between those people who qualify and don't quite qualify. I mean, it's like, is it a second, hundredths of a second? I mean, what's the
It's tiny, yes, it's tiny. Yeah. You know, races are won by, you know, fractions, and to the extreme that, you know, you shave the hair off your body to give you a few more seconds, you shave the hair off your head, you you rest, you taper, you buy a flash swimsuit that's super fast, and you put all of these extra things in. When I was at uni, I juggled the course load around being able to sort of compete more and train more at certain times. It's a lot of sacrifice, and I thank my parents for keep getting up in the mornings and keep taking me. Without that, none of this would have happened. And probably the happiest day of their lives was when I passed my driving test, and then they sort of hand over the car keys and said, "That's it, you're on your own now."
Yeah.
Take your time. I was like, "Oh, that was easy, asking for the car."
Yeah, that's true. It really is true. I'm sort of new to this swimming malarkey, and getting up so early to get in the pool, like you say, and I now swim quite a lot on my own. But there's a mum and her daughter from Cass and Friends who's at the pool quite often when I'm there, and bless her, Vanessa's been there for a good hour before I've even pitched up, and so I see the commitment from the parents. It's insane, and the commitment from you, like you say, the sacrifice, because for swimming, you seem to be training for hours and hours for, like, as you say, a 60-second or a 2-minute race or something. At least triathletes get a bit of more bang for their buck in terms of the distance of the race.
I don't know, there's several schools of thought now, and things are changing, and it was deemed that, by the age of 11, 12, if you hadn't have put in so many hours at that sort of skills hungry age, that sponge like soaking up all the skills, you'd never quite make it. And on the one hand, you can almost see that I used to work more with junior triathletes. We tried to organize a training group, and for an ex-swimmer that had been swimming from 8, 9, 10, they just had that fluid movement, whereas somebody at 12, 13 was just, they were working hard, they were developing skills, but there was just that, you could just see them thinking the process through, and it was never quite as fluid. But then at the other end of the scale now, people are having, several years off. There's an Australian rock star that's had a huge time out to pursue his singing career, and has just gone back and made Australian trials, which seems to, maybe it's a one-off, but it seems to sort of put to one side some of these theories that there's many ways to do this, but back then it was very much 10, 11 times a week, and the drop off or the dropout ratio was huge, sadly. And I look back and think, there were so many of us in those younger years. And then fast forward, I went to the 1992 Olympic trials, and looking through the age groups, there was only 1 or 2 of us that had been born in 1970 still sort of competing. So back in 1983, my first nationals, there were 40 of us ish in the 100 meters freestyle, all born in 1970. And then all gone, where perhaps we didn't get it right. There was too much swimming, it was too dull. I mean, it's not the most exciting sport, let's be honest, in terms of the training. Racing can be fantastic, but it's a lot of getting up early, struggling to get your studies in, finding time to juggle everything. And I was working at some swimming clubs, and the parents would ask me, is little Johnny going to make it? And at the age of 10, 11, you can't answer those questions. No. And their response is, well, the club's asking for 7, 8 swims per week, but there's tennis, and there's math tutorial, and there's trumpet. And I'm like, this is really hard now. I'm glad I didn't have those distractions.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you say about the parents asking that too, because I went to university in Bath, and I just recently got this sort of, like, I think they send you like a magazine every year, and inside there was this really interesting article that the sports scientists have been working on in terms of growth and maturation in sport, and at what age, how kids can mature at such a different time. And so instead of competing in age groups, much better to compete in how their body is maturing and their physiology. And for swimming, that's got to be a huge impact, hasn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, the reason I became a distance swimmer, I grew up racing in the Essex counties, and from sort of the 10 and under, Mark Foster was over at Southend Swimming Club, and he was 4 or 5 inches taller than me from the start.
Yes.
I was just thinking, this is never going to work. So I started to swim longer and longer, and to get away from Mark, who stuck with the sprints. And that was from 10, 11 years all the way through. Like, thanks, Mark, for making me do all of those extra sessions for the long distance swimming. But
Yes.
I'm glad I didn't really have to race you beyond 12, 13, because he was 6'5" from a very young age.
Yeah. No, it's so different. So then, Dan, you went. So did you go to Millfield, or did you go to a different school?
I did 2 years at Milford. I did my A levels. Neil had graduated and was already at Louisiana State by now, so he'd put me in touch with a fantastic swim coach, Paddy Garrett, and I applied to do my A levels there, which led me nicely into the 1988 Seoul Olympics trials. I raced there in the 200 fly, 1500. So again, I was really already starting to look at the longer distance events. And then the trials went pretty well. I made consolation finals, and I was keen to then follow Neil to the US, who was about to graduate, and put me in touch with some of his teammates that were now becoming graduate assistant coaches while they're doing their master's degrees. And one of his teammates went to Ohio University, and I got in touch with the coach. And January 1990, I was on my way to the US. I didn't really know where Ohio was, but I didn't really care. I was just excited to take advantage of the facilities. That imagine having a 10-lane, 50-meter pool on campus, and all the other things that went along with that for a degree course that lasted 4 years.
Amazing.
4 years of swimming championships, coming home in the summer, racing the British trials, British championships. It was a fabulous time. Really enjoyed that. It was tricky because of the collegiate system. The collegiate season is somewhat out of sync, but the fact that they were paying for me to race for them in terms of for the tutoring, for the books, food, and so on. I mean, I wasn't getting paid to race, but this was all being accommodated and paid for. I gave that my all, and I really enjoyed collegiate racing. It was very different to the British Championship system, and I really thrived on that. And it was interesting. We talked earlier about sort of the podcast and speaking to some sports psychologists, how that group dynamic, I thrived better than an individual. As a solitary swimmer at British Olympic trials, I raced to a much higher level with that pressure of the group racing for my team, and I struggled to reproduce that as an individual solo swimmer, as it were. So I enjoyed the US system.
That's really interesting, isn't it? The way you say about the psychology, the mindset, and being much more able to push yourself for the team. So when we talked earlier about now some of our athletes do have a little bit more of a support network. Was there any sports psychology in the States when you were there to help you through that, or
not directly? I mean, it's interesting now that 25 years later, I look back and it was all quite. I mean, the pressure of racing for the team was there, but there was no. We had athletic trainers that were keeping us healthy from a physical perspective, but even at that high level, there was nobody talking to our minds, or diet and nutrition was somewhat limited. Well, very limited, really. So much has evolved in the last 20 years that, any aspiring triathlete can come and get video analysis at the swimming pool quite easily all around the UK. There I was at a good program in the US for 4 years, and they would video our swimming races from the stands, and we'd get to watch the swim meet. But, there was nothing technical about that. It's amazing how so much of the support system has evolved just in the last few years, really. And we're now understanding that it is very much a team affair. I probably had sort of a swim coach all the way through my junior years, then the A-level years at Millfield. The US was a little bit different. There's a little bit more support, but it was more sort of keeping you healthy, the ability to go and speak to a, student physiotherapist that could, help mend a bad elbow or something. Yeah, there were certainly limitations, even though this was, groundbreaking in other respects.
Yeah. I tell you what else has changed. Our athletes, we've got 2 who've gone to the States now, 1 who's just about to go, and we've got 2 who are currently there. And the way they get us selected is they get messaged on Instagram. They get a direct message from the unis on Instagram. Isn't that funny? It's like totally different.
Yeah, I'd have been waiting for a letter in the post.
I know. Yeah, it's like snail mail, or yeah, absolutely. So it's so different now. Yeah, so different. So yeah, I guess there are agents out there now helping young athletes find an American uni, or the unis they just follow them on Instagram, and then they message them. They get a direct message saying, "Do you want to come to train with us?" So
wow, oh God.
Another difference there. But I'm fascinated by the changes in technology. I mean, in the swimming, you had those race suits that were banned. We had the carbon shoes that were all a bit controversial, weren't they? But these things change.
We really, it was 1986 to 88 that I was at Millfield, and Paddy was quite groundbreaking. We had some heart rate testing back then, and we were trained to heart rate, which is something I hadn't done before. But apparently Polar were one of the early adopters of that technology, and we sort of, but it was mostly for horse racing, where there was obviously a lot of money involved. So the technology was following that track, and someone sort of had the idea of getting this big chest strap for a horse, and there we were at the swimming pool with this thing. It was quite bizarre. And then, we would swim in running shoes and t-shirts for drag. Now you've got parachutes, you've got little propellers that slow you down and make you work harder. There's pools with mirrors on the bottom for, so you can watch and check your own analysis and see where your hand pathways are. Endless pools are quite common now. A lot of the unis in the US have them as a secondary pool, well, not even secondary, probably third or fourth pool available for, extra analysis and video playback. It's remarkable. Pressure sensors on your hands, all sorts of things are available now. And gosh, open water and triathlon has spawned all sorts of new things. We've got compasses inside our swimming goggles, head-up displays.
Yeah.
It's some of my old coaches, if they could see, what's happening now, I think they'd be quite blown away.
Yeah. I've been sort of begging and borrowing any type of coaching I can get for my swimming. So I've got a friend who lives in our village, and she might be 70, maybe even 75. Anyway, she used to be a swim coach. So I just said, "Oh, Angela, will you come and swim with me a bit?" And so she did, and she goes, "Let's check your pulse." So halfway through, she's like, because obviously she wouldn't have had a heart rate monitor, so she's checking her pulse. See what the heart rate's doing. So yeah, it has significantly changed. So what advice, Dan, do you think you can give to parents of our athletes who've got kids coming up, and like you've been there, you've done it, you've been that athlete, and you've gone off to the American uni system. What was really good about that, and what advice can you give to parents in terms of letting their kids fly and go, or not? What do you think about that for parents?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? It's a huge sacrifice, but by the time 16, 17, 18 comes around, I think at that point you're making decisions, and you are really, you're on track. I got to 16 and I was still quite a good runner. I was obviously very fit from the world of swimming, and I hadn't really started any weight training or anything like that. So I was still running quite well. And fast forward, if the British Triathlon had been around and I'd gone for trials, maybe at the age of 16, I might have gone into triathlon a whole lot earlier. It would have been a tough call, because I'd won some medals at nationals at the age of 16. I got a silver and a bronze at national championships. So I was really, focusing on swimming. So to tear away from it into a sport that was quite unheard of back then in 1986, it would have been a tough call, and I could see Neil's career unfolding. Louisiana State, then he went off to coach and stayed in the US, and he'd been to the Olympics, and I'd grown up with him and I knew him, and I was thinking, well, he's doing it and I'm working hard. I might get close to where he is, who knows? So I knew it was what I wanted to do at that point, and leaving home at 16 to go to the boarding school was quite a big deal. I'd left a Northeast London comprehensive, and I was really quite out of my depth in terms of the school side of things. For fitting in. But then I knew this was the place to go to the next step forward, to go on to an American university. I had no qualms about I honestly did not know where Ohio was. I just got on a plane. We landed in Boston. I got a connecting flight. One of the assistants picked me up and we arrived, and I was like, this is amazing. I knew at that point that's what I wanted to do. And I had few distractions. I was doing enough schoolwork to get by. I probably should have done more, but you're tired. You're swimming 4.5 hours a day. There's dry land. There's, other things to be doing. And, at an early age, I didn't suddenly say I wanted to be a doctor and put all my focus into that. I was swimming and I had this pathway, and I thought I would go to the Olympics. I was focused, I was keen, and I was trying really hard to do that. So there was no musical instruments to distract me. There was no other sport, possibly running, possibly triathlon, but it was in its infancy, so it didn't really factor because there was no governing body luring me away. I mean, it's interesting now that, if you're a good rower, you might go and do cycling trials and vice versa. And people are doing well in both disciplines, which is remarkable, that can happen. So I, as I said to them, the parents, I said, look, if your children are enjoying coming swimming, support them. Let them go, let them enjoy it, keep it somewhat sensible, try to keep the academics going, as obviously that's vital, because you're going to need something. There's not, unless you're very, very good, there's not much money in swimming, really. What else can you do? And so you need your academic background to go hand in hand with that. So we had some tricky discussions with the parents. I wholeheartedly, back then, you had City of Birmingham Polytechnic and Leeds that had good swimming clubs, but they were all separate. It was a really hard thing to do, to join the City of Leeds Swimming Club and study. The two were very separate. It would have been tough. The pool separate. Going to the US was the only option really back then. 4 years to get your degree done. The sporting facilities were on campus. It was geared up for it. Yeah. The UK degrees were 3 years. It was all very accelerated. It was intense, and it would have been really hard work. But here we were on campus, what resembled sort of Crystal Palace, in its heyday in terms of the facilities. The track, the football stadium, the basketball arena. But that's not the only option now. You've got amazing things happening at Bath and Loughborough, and where you've got this combined sport with the academic world now. So you don't have to go to the US. It is exciting. It is amazing to be overseas. There are temptations. One of my teammates I recruited him at the 1992 trials. He came back with me. He raced for a year, didn't do so well with his exams, lost his scholarship, lost his position, because the funding goes, if your grades aren't good enough, you don't get the scholarship money, and that was it. So you've got to be really focused and want to do it. And I think by 16, 17, 18, I think most youngsters will know that whether that's right for them or not, and they'll know at this point. As you say, social media now gives you an insight so easy. I was writing letters to swim coaches who were, many of them were politely writing back, and to look back at now, It's so archaic.
Yes.
It's hilarious that they would find time in the day to write to someone overseas to say thanks for applying, but our team's full at the moment or something.
Yeah.
Handwritten letters.
Yeah, I love it. That's brilliant. But yeah, so Caitlin's one of our athletes. She's out there. Will be going into her third year. I think her first year was quite tough, but she stuck it out. She stayed and she's loving it now. So it might not be, that transition is a big deal and it might not be so easy. Maybe going to Millfield helped a little bit. You'd already made that first leap away.
Yeah, I think that was a real good intermediate step with being away from home, getting used to sort of campus food in the dormitories and so on. That was, that's a change. You've got a lot of different things to your routine, that will make life easier. But they are change, and some people will adapt to that. Some people won't like it. There were three of us in a room. One of the guys was quite noisy. I was trying to get up early. I was disturbing him as I left. The housemaster sort of had to get up early to let me out the house because the alarms downstairs were on, and it was there were some challenges back then, but I knew what I wanted to do, and that was going to be it regardless.
yeah, exactly. And Dan, so again, our athletes are going to have ups and downs. They're going to have disappointments, I guess. How did you cope with not making the Olympic team in the end?
That was interesting. I think I'd enjoyed myself so much in the US and sort of had my own mini Olympic adventure. I'd gone overseas. I'd had as a junior, I'd had a couple of trips overseas and raced in France and Austria and Germany, which was fabulous. I think I was getting, obviously as you get older, the improvements slow. And I think one year I trained all year and I improved my 200 meter. As a 16-year-old, I had a really good year. I won medals at nationals, and maybe it was the first year of A levels. It was quite a big transition. The rate of improvement slowed down, and it was frustrating. Like all of this work resulted in just like a couple of tenths on my best event. So then I sort of looked at some other events and mixed up some things, added in some weight training, and then I had my upper 6 year had a little bit of a kickstart. I got back to Millfield and I was fit, I was healthy, in a good state of mind, and I started to improve again, and I thought I was back on track. So as a junior it had gone really well, and then fortunately I had this big adventure overseas. Again, I was racing yards, which was very different. And I think I was geared up really well for that style of racing, which it sounds like, well, what's the difference? But, racing in a 25-yard pool against one other team in a dual meet, one other university, was really exciting. And, by my senior year, I was captain. We broke through and beat some teams we hadn't in a long time, and we had a really successful. And then I won my event in the conference. Sort of the US was split up into conferences, and I went to the conference championships and I won the 500-yard free, which was just I think that was kind of my Olympics, and I was very happy at that. Really delighted. I'd had this journey. I knew I was good, but not good enough. And that was okay. And I graduated. I came back to England. I thought about, actually, my coach asked if I would stay on for a year, and I wonder about that sometimes. But I was 23 by now, and that was considered quite a long career at the time in swimming. And my parents had sacrificed a lot and put a lot into it's not cheap. It's not cheap. And I just thought, what, maybe it's time to think about work. And I was okay about that. With hindsight now, I'm a little bit frustrated because I think I would have been a really good open water swimmer. But it wasn't really available at a competitive level. Swimming for 2 hours in a 10K or whatever it might have been, and having I was a long distance swimmer, but I had a good turn of speed. I had a good finishing. I could do a reasonable 100, but I had a strong long distance. So, to tick over, I'd quite a high VO2 max and good fitness, and I enjoyed the long distance. I enjoyed the hard work. And I think I could have, with what I know now as an open water triathlon coach, I think my event, I missed my event.
Yes.
The Olympics, if you get my point. So again, I can look fondly and think like, oh, I wonder, maybe. So, I have a little daydream and think about that, thinking like, yeah, I'd have been, 9.8K, and then a sprint finish would have been my thing. I really would have liked that. So yeah, I kind of knew, and I think I'd done enough, and I'd been successful enough at my level. I'd quite humble beginnings and with a lot of parental support, just, plain old comprehensive school via Millfield, via the US. It was enough, I think. And then I got a little bit bored of just work, and I thought, like, I need something else. And I'd been going to the gym, and so I'd worked for it, and then just stumbled into triathlon, which filled a little bit of that void. And I got quite competitive again at Olympic distance in the late 90s, early 2000s, and became an age grouper. And that sort of helped me really solidify. Yeah, I would have really enjoyed open water racing. I really have taken a shine to this. And I raced reasonably well. Then I got into masters, and I was coaching now, and quitting my old world, which was sort of video, computing, audio. I'd been at a sound studio, and then a software company that did sort of video and DVD production and so on. And then my sister and I started Swim for Tri. So maybe that filled the void as well, living coaching vicariously through other people's racing or whatever.
Absolutely. I think it's a lovely story. I think it's great, fantastic that you were able to have that attitude at the time. We all know of Olympians who've gone to the Olympics and won gold medals and not even been satisfied with that. So there's never a pinnacle, is there? But it feels like you had, like you say, your own Olympic journey, and the college stuff was amazing. And then, as you say, coming back and doing age group triathlon, and now even more so, your job is, I think, doing what you love. It feels like you've made a really lovely career out of your sport.
Yeah, I think it was a good balance. It was a good balance. I've met some world champions, and I think there's another level of focus and determination and selfishness that I didn't have. So I knew now, I know that, there was something, and that maybe a sports psychologist could have helped me replicate what I enjoyed and felt racing for a big team, and could have channeled it into a solo thing. But I don't think I actually had it, having met some people and sort of listened to them, and I'm not sure I'd want it, actually. It's where they thrive in the big lights and then struggle in other areas. It's a tricky career. It's a tricky career at that level, I think.
Yeah, no, I see that. So would you like to tell us a little bit about Swim for Tri, and then we may wrap up?
Yeah, so it was about 2000. Well, to be honest, as I was coming back from the US, a friend of mine do you know the London Youth Games at Crystal Palace?
Yes.
Interborough competition. So I'd done that as a swimmer, and it was fabulous. And then a friend of mine was the London Youth Games, Waltham Forest, our borough, was the team manager. And he said, like, oh, swimming, you must know some biking and running. I need help setting up the junior triathlon club. I'm like, oh, I don't actually, but we'll give it a go. I know some people at East London Tri. I can ask some questions, and we'll give it a go, and we'll take a team to Crystal Palace. So I started helping in the world of triathlon in the early 90s. So I knew of it by this time. And then fast forward, I'd been racing quite seriously as an age grouper. I'd gone on to do Ironman Lake Placid in 2003. And I was getting probably a little bit fed up with my career, and people kept asking me, how do you swim the way you do as a triathlete. I'm like, well, I'm fortunate. I'm an ex-swimmer. Oh, can you give me some tips? And my sister was teaching swimming at this point. And basically, we just sort of merged our skill set. I knew filming. I had access to underwater cameras, video editing, and we just sort of merged this. And we'd take cameras to the pool. We'd film. We'd offer, video footage, review. Swimmers were coming. I was racing, so I had access to triathlon, and people, and this was a time when adults could basically learn how to swim. And that was it. If they'd been unfortunate to miss swimming, they could learn how to swim. If they were unfortunate to have missed it, that was their only offering. No one was helping adults to learn how to swim faster, so which is what triathlon was asking. So that's kind of the niche area that my sister and I hit on with Swim for Tri. And there were no courses, there were no textbooks back then, but I was racing open water. I was learning as I went. My sister was a qualified swim teacher. I took some coaching courses because I knew a lot about swimming, having done it all my life from a very young age, but I didn't know how to communicate it. So the two went hand in hand. And we did some technical stuff, some drills courses. Then people wanted to swim outdoors, so we hired a lake. We went. The people wanted fitness sessions, so we hired some pools and did fitness stuff in the mornings and the afternoons. People wanted to go overseas, make a training camp of it. We got in touch with Club La Santa, and it just evolved really. And after a year or so, there was enough momentum that we both quit our full-time jobs, and we've just had our 21st birthday. So yeah,
that's amazing, isn't it?
And it was nice because it's sort of an ongoing legacy for my dad, because I did the London Tri for the first time in 1998 to raise money for Macmillan nurses who'd looked after my dad. He had lung cancer. And sort of each year we at the end of the lake season, we have a barbecue and fundraiser for various charities. We're fond of melanoma research at the moment. We lost one of our coaches, sadly, to skin cancer. So that's been a focus the last few years. But it's just a nice tribute, and it keeps going. And fingers crossed, it will keep going.
Well, I'm sure it will. Having experienced one of your camps, and the next one that I did in March. I think it's the 14th of March, 2025. So any triathletes listening, get yourself out to Swim for Tri, Club La Santa. It's a brilliant course.
Yeah, we've loved going back there, and the facility. Well, as 3 50-meter pools. The lagoon is a lovely stepping stone into open water, and then the trip to Porta del Carmen for the open water itself, where the Ironman is. It's a lovely little week of training that we've been going back. I think it's about 10 years now. So hopefully that will continue as well.
I'm sure it will, Dan. I'm sure it will. Well, thank you very much for your time indeed this afternoon. It's absolutely a pleasure to see you again and ask you all those questions.
Most welcome. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Athletic Ambitions. We hope you found this episode of interest, and if so, be sure to send this to your family and friends who might also benefit. If you're interested in donating to Cass and Friends, the links are in the description, and we'll hope to see you in the next episode. Thanks, Tom and Fee.